Next-gen consoles are on the way, and you probably haven't pre-ordered one yet, just like me. But in the meantime, that doesn't mean that we can't sit around and dream about what we could possibly be playing in the next generation of consoles and games, namely yours truly and ours favorite. Undoubtedly, with the great success that was No Man's Sky Origins, Hello Games are probably cooking up something beautiful for the new hotness that's coming up in November. And I've got some spicy speculation for you here in the LZ. Stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the LZ, and so good to have you back. Today's subject is going to be regarding the next-gen consoles that are on the horizon for mid-November. And knowing what we know about them now, I want to take some time to speculate about what a next-gen No Man's Sky update would look like. Talking about everything that we can expect easily for the next No Man's Sky Next Gen update to have, some possible reasonable additions, and stay to the end of the video where I talk about crazy, stupid, impossible shit that they could probably do with this game. Get your commenting fingers ready. I want to hear from you in the comment section below what you want to see in the next gen No Man's Sky update, and then of course tell me how wrong I am. Always love to hear from you. Also those of you who joined the LZ just recently, thanks to the 50,000 views that I got on my Origins review, thanks for coming along and welcome back. Now, firstly, let's talk about some of the expected stuff, reasonable additions that we might see for a No Man's Sky Next Gen update for Xbox Series X and or PlayStation 5. I'm not really personally a console warrior myself. I enjoy both of these, and both of these consoles sound like they have crazy merits on their own, but rather just talking about what both consoles seem to have really going for them. Obviously, the talk of the No Man's Sky and Next Gen update town is the SSD, the solid-state drives that they added to both of these new gen consoles coming up. And if I were Hello Games and I were to do a reasonable update for No Man's Sky for the next consoles coming up, it would undoubtedly be focusing on this piece of hardware. These new solid-state drives built into the hardware, coupled with 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 RAM, they're going to be an absolute blessing for the new consoles coming up. Even games that aren't necessarily coded for it yet, that are running in current gen, are seeing benefits from crazy reductions in load times for these. But making your impatient ass wait a little bit less time for a game to load isn't exactly the number one idea of why these SSDs are so good for next gen consoles, and why it's going to be great for a No Man's Sky update. But really the biggest benefit would likely come from the gameplay experience, not just having to wait a little bit less time. Originally, before No Man's Sky launched, we all thought that there was going to be seamless travel between star systems, and boy were we wrong. Man, those were the days. No Man's Sky launch period. But of course, since launch, we've known that every time that we warp between planets or between star systems, we know that there is a load time that happens between that. One of the unfortunate aspects about the Origins update is that this load time increased by just a little bit, unfortunately. And of course, the reason why we have these load times is that while you're warping to these new star systems, the game has to load all of the assets that would be on any one of the planets that you can load into that one star system. Trees, rocks, animals, what have you. Those things generally have to be loaded into the memory, sitting there waiting for you to discover should you land on a planet to actually see that asset in action. You may never actually land on the planet that particular one rock is sitting in the memory waiting for you to see, but overall it helps for the better seamless transition from out of space and into atmosphere. Not only are the SSDs fast, but they also make the activity of having to load up the current 8 gigabytes of RAM that our current gen systems have pretty much an obsolete process. The beautiful part about the new SSDs and the relationship to the new GDDR6 RAM is that they can communicate and have these things happen pretty much almost completely on the fly, which means that we might just see a No Man's Sky happen that doesn't have these massive load times, but rather the game and the console can exchange this information from the disk, or rather the solid state drive, and the memory almost instantly. This could create for seamless warps, whether it be through portals or between star systems. And I wager if No Man's Sky and Hello Games really did have an idea of seamless travel between star systems, there's a whole lot of cool shit you can find out there in the darkness of space between stars. I'm just saying, Sean. I'm just saying. Just listen to your boy LZ. I've been begging for rogue planets for a very long time. This is your shot. Now, of course, during the current generation of games, one of the hotter topics at the beginning where these two consoles have launched was performance. If you're feeling nostalgic about dunking on Xbox fans because their games could barely run at 720p, I know I said earlier in the beginning of the video that I wasn't console fanboying, but I still, those were the good old days, remember? But one of the bigger conversations happening was resolution versus frame rate. And then, of course, even the PS4 had its times where games were running closer to 720p or having dynamic resolution and resolution scaling to accommodate performance on the particular type of game it was trying to run. Sounds like now the new consoles have plenty of performance overhead for a type of game like No Man's Sky, running at resolutions upwards of 4K and 60 frames per second, which, if I remember correctly, the current Xbox One X is actually capable of doing for the game. Just imagine the bells and whistles that they could implement for something like the Series X to run this game at full 4K and 60 frames, or even 120 frames, which the console is clearly capable of doing, being able to jack up shadows, anti-aliasing, and the overall graphical options that the game could already have. Not to mention double the memory that the current generation consoles have. That could make for just an infinite amount of more crap on the screen at once. Possibly maybe making the cloud guy that's bugging Sean Murray daily on Twitter maybe happy someday. That also brings up terrain generation too, which honestly during the current generation has been a little troublesome depending on which update we're talking about and what hardware you're running it on. Obviously, with a stronger CPU and GPU, churning out the maths that actually create the land and all of that in this game, coupled with the SSD and the GDDR6 RAM, that whole 16 gigabytes of it, Hello Games has a lot more free elbow room to do whatever the heck they want to without having to constantly be conscious of everything that's happening in the hardware. And then, of course, for performance, this might actually make it possible to have bigger multiplayer lobbies. When Origins launched, it was a huge problem, especially in the Anomaly when several people would join and the frame rates would tank. I'm not an expert, but I'm really wondering if this is less of a network problem and more of a hardware performance problem. So this is something I'm pretty excited about. I'm excited for faster load times, but I'm excited to see what a developer like Hello Games can do with the beautiful solid-state drives that the next consoles are getting. My poor PlayStation 4 Pro is definitely showing its legs, what's left of them, really. And the poor fan inside for the cooling solution has definitely seen better days, or rather it makes me hear that every day, every time I play it. Might have to bury this poor guy soon. Now for the part you've been waiting for. Let's get stupid with this particular speculation. If you watched my No Man's Sky Origins review, you know that I praised it for finally stretching its legs a little bit as far as getting crazy, getting alien, getting stupid with the game's design, and letting it open its wings a little bit. Let your hair down, Hello Games, and really let it be sci-fi for once. And it did that quite a bit. But as far as crazy, stupid, impossible shit that Hello Games could actually do for No Man's Sky and next-gen consoles, I think it's probably impossible, but I would almost like to see what a next-gen only version of No Man's Sky would look like. Now, before you unsubscribe or tweet at me all of your hatred and how ugly and how I can't read good and all that, just hear me out for a second. Crossplay in No Man's Sky is a thing, and it's a thing on all platforms. So already I think this is probably not possible strictly for the fact that I know that Hello Games are going to want to keep these platforms together. They do love having a cohesive community that likes to play together, and so if I were them, I would probably take the idea of a next-gen only version of No Man's Sky that does not crossplay with the previous platforms, and probably not paying too much attention for that reason. But a next-gen only version of No Man's Sky that would not cater or have to worry too much about the limitations of previous generation hardware might be pretty exciting. It could be like a No Man's Sky remastered for next generation consoles. You know all those remasters you played, like The Last of Us that ran at a strong and fluid frame rate versus the game on PlayStation 3 that did not. I think all of us, to a certain degree, want to take our favorite games like Bloodborne, From Software, Bloodborne, thank you, and we want to see what those games can do with that new generation hardware in mind. So if you were to take a game like No Man's Sky, port it exclusively to the next generation hardware without feeling like you're being constrained by the community and the previous hardware, this could actually be a good thing for the game. Now, I just know the few of you that are already listening to this ready to send me the usual DMs on Twitter that you usually do instead of responding to my tweets in utter disagreement. How dare you, sir, say this thing that I don't think you should have said because I disagree. Really take a moment and just think about what a true next-gen version of No Man's Sky could look like. Of course, we can talk about things like ray tracing, which is another marquee aspect of the new generation consoles coming up. No Man's Sky already offers a real-time lighting solution, which is absolutely gorgeous, especially with Origins. But just picture a Hello Games unbound by previous-gen hardware turning out a No Man's Sky edition for next-gen consoles. Honestly, I would be absolutely happy to give them my money for that again. Because oddly enough, in a world of subscription games and games as a service, No Man's Sky is one of the only games the current generation that has existed for this entire time without demanding another penny from me, so I feel perfectly fine in paying for a next-gen version of the next game. That doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a sequel, but I just picture myself as Sean Murray sitting at my desk coding No Man's Sky during a couple of months of crunch time, absolutely kicking myself in the shin for how horribly restrained I am with the current gen hardware and having it not do the things that I desperately want to do creatively in my mind. I personally, if I were Sean Murray, would want something that would allow me to take the governors completely off and allow me to get wicked with some of the things that I wish I could have done with previous gen tech that I now have at my disposal. Or you can all just get triggered at me when I say that maybe No Man's Sky 2 should actually happen. I know they said they don't like sequels, but Sean, you're wrong for this. What do you think we should do for a No Man's Sky next generation update? What are some of the what do you expect from it? What are some reasonable additions you think they could do to it? And what are some of the stupid bonkers thing that they should do that you know they won't do? What do you think they should do? And also, thanks to my boy Ivy Mike for being a long-time subscriber to the LZ. 14 months straight he has supported monetarily the LZ, and you too can do the same by clicking the join button down low. LZ's going hungry during pandemic life, and maybe, just maybe, one of these days I'll do this crap full time. I love it here, I love all of you, and thank you for clicking the LZ again and watching, and I'll see you in the next time.